Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, South Carolina, heading into 2025. That many of y'all know by now, this is one of those football teams that I'm extremely high on heading into 2025. And I feel like we've talked about this football team from just about every single angle possible over the last couple of months. Now, we're out of spring practice, we're out of the spring transfer portal. Now we have a pretty good feel of what this team is going to look like heading into fall camp, heading into 2025. Now it's that portion of the offseason where you kind of call your shot a little bit. And I got some, I think, really fun, bold predictions to talk about for the South Carolina team going into 2025. Now, before we get into it, I think the best part about this particular episode is one, I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I enjoyed prepping this one and kind of putting together my predictions. But more importantly, if you are listening to this episode in the middle of May, chances are you got some takes too that are rather spicy about this team going into 2025. Please let it fly in the comment section. Appreciate the South Carolina fans. It's been really fun talking this football team, and the amount of support y'all have shown the boys has been amazing. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into it, and let's talk about something that I've kind of banged the table for over the last couple of months. And I really, part of my evaluation in terms of why I'm so high in this South Carolina team is what I think this offensive line is going to be. And quite frankly, what I think the run game is going to be. Rasul Faison leads the SEC in rushing in the 2025 season. Now, we're still waiting on confirmation that Rasul Faison is eligible for 2025. And look, we're getting to the point in middle of May that if they rule this kid ineligible to play, I'm just going to throw a riot. I think it's fair to assume he's going to be playing for South Carolina in 2025. I think they brought Rasul Faison in to be the workhorse back in this room. This offensive line, I've been very vocal. I think it's the best offensive line that Shane Beamer has had during his time at South Carolina. Anytime you have a quarterback like LaNorris Sellers, who is arguably the best athlete on the football field, you're going to want to run the football. I think Rasul Faison, one, is a really good running back. Number two, we've heard that from South Carolina in spring practice. They are extremely happy with what they have in Rasul Faison going into 2025. This is a football team that ran the football almost 60% of offensive snaps in 2024. Think they're going to want to do that again in 2025. You have the running back to do so. You have the offensive line to do so. You have the quarterback to do so. I think this rushing attack has the opportunity to be very good for South Carolina. And I think Rasul Faison is going to be that workhorse back that can do it all for South Carolina going into 2025. And I think the thing that excites me the most about Rasul Faison is I think he adds a little bit more juice in space. You know, the ability to make people miss, the ability to hit the big play. I think he's going to get 20 plus carries a game. And then I look at the rest of the SEC landscape and say, you look at Georgia and say they didn't run the football nearly as well as we expected them to in 2024. They lose a good chunk of their offensive line to the NFL draft. You look at a team like Texas. I look at Texas and say, look, I kind of have some blind confidence that the offensive line is going to be solid, but they got to replace pretty much that whole offensive line, including two starting tackles. I look at South Carolina and say there's just not many programs in the SEC that I trust to run the football like South Carolina in 2025, and I think they have the running back to lead this conference in rushing. Give me Rasul Faison leading the SEC and rushing in 2025. Number two, and this is maybe the bold prediction that should excite the South Carolina fans the most. The sack percentage for the South Carolina offense gets cut in half in the 2025 year. You look at South Carolina, especially in the month of November, this was an offense that was extremely dynamic, and really towards the end of 2024 was one of the more dangerous offenses that we saw in the country. They were getting sacked 10.9% of dropbacks. That was 129th in the Power Four. It was one of the and not just Power Four, excuse me, that was FBS. They were one of the worst teams in the country when it comes to taking sacks. What happens if that number just gets cut in half? And I think it can, because you got kind of two things working for you here. Number one, the offensive line. Now, I've been vocal, think it's going to be pretty dang solid for South Carolina, but specifically at offensive tackle. Josiah Thompson going into year two. Look, if you told me in the beginning of November this kid was considered one of the best tackles in the SEC, wouldn't be all that surprised. I think Casey Henry also played some solid football towards the end of 2024. I trust your starting tackles. The interior of the offensive line is extremely deep with some young talent, but also some guys who have a ton of veteran experience. And then I think the second thing is LaNorris Sellers processing a little bit quicker, getting the football out of his hands and understanding how to manage the offense a little bit more effectively. There were times where LaNorris Sellers got himself out of sacks at times, but there was also some times where, hey, that ball's got to come out quicker and we got to manage the pocket a little bit better. I think going into year 3 of his career, year 2 as a starter, you're going to see him understand how to manage a pocket and kind of blend his athleticism with processing and getting the football out quickly. If South Carolina cuts their sack percentage in half and takes half of the negative plays that they took in 2024, this offense is going to be significantly better. Here's another one that I was kind of playing around with. South Carolina was outside of the top 100 in red zone scoring last year. That's also a number that I think could dramatically improve for South Carolina in the 2025 year. If you can limit the amount of negative plays you take, if you can score a little bit more effectively in the red zone, there's reason to believe this offense takes a massive step in the right direction in the 2025 season. Number 3, I don't even know how bold this is, but I'm going to go Nick Harbor goes for over 1,000 yards. I think he's the clear wide receiver 1 in this offense, and I think the potential for him to explode onto the scene in the 2025 year, it's real. Now, I think to maybe a casual college football fan that doesn't follow the recruiting trail, you might not even be all that familiar with Nick Harbor unless they mentioned him on the broadcast because of his track and field times. A guy that hasn't necessarily dominated college football just yet. The whole offseason, this kid's focusing on football. I thought you saw him turn the corner. I mean, here's the example of him turning the corner. In the month of September, he had less than 50 yards all of the month of September to start the year. You fast forward to the month of November, he didn't have a single game that he went for less than 40 receiving yards in the month of November in 2024. You saw Nick Harbor turn the corner. You saw that light bulb start to flicker going into 2025, especially replacing all the pass catching production that Joshua Simon had. I think Nick Harbor can go for 1,000 yards. Now, here's the reason that this bold prediction maybe doesn't come true. And it might have nothing to do with Nick Harbor. Like, Nick Harbor might take that step and emerge as one of the best wide receivers in the SEC. If he doesn't go for 1,000 yards, that probably has a little bit more to do with these true freshmen emerging and just having a wide receiver room that has so many mouths to feed that may be a struggle to get Nick Harbor over 1,000 yards. But I think he's the clear wide receiver 1 going into 2025. I think his skill set fits exactly what LaNorris Sellers wants to do, and that means pushing that sucker down the field. Give me Nick Harbor going for over 1,000 yards. And look, you look at that trio of playmaking talent, LaNorris Sellers, Rasul Faison, Nick Harbor. If all 3 of those football players reach their potential in 2025, this is an offense that's going to be extremely difficult to deal with for opposing defenses. Switching over to the defensive side of the football, and this is really, I think, the concern for a lot of South Carolina fans, and we've kind of been saying this all spring, is like we know that South Carolina is going to be a solid football team in 2025. How good are they going to be? I think has a lot to do with how good this defense can be. It was really good last year. It's going to take a step back probably in the 2025 year. The question is, how big of a step is it going to be taken back? If it's only a little bit of a step back, you're still looking at a top 25, top 30 defense in the country, which I think is more than good enough to get South Carolina to the playoffs. I'm going to go Brian Thomas goes for 5 sacks. Like, I looked at the Dylan Stewart bold prediction. I said Dylan Stewart goes for 10 sacks. Is that even is that even that bold of a take? Like, I think he's one of the best pure football players in the country going into 2025. Brian Thomas, nobody's really talking about him because last year, all the talking points were Kyle Kennard and Dylan Stewart, and rightfully so. Those are the best edge rusher duo that you saw in the country. Brian Thomas, kind of a sneaky underrated edge rusher who's played a decent amount of football for South Carolina over the last couple of years. And actually, I mean, Kyle Kennard had a 13% pass rush win rate. Brian Thomas had a 12.5% pass rush win rate. Now, Kyle Kennard was a little bit better at converting that win rates to sacks in 2024. Can Brian Thomas be that guy? He's going to have the biggest opportunity of his career at South Carolina to really be a dude. And I think he's quietly been a very good football player for South Carolina, just hasn't had the opportunity. Can you get somebody to really step up opposite of Dylan Stewart? We all know Dylan Stewart's going to get the superstar treatment. Running backs, tight ends, they're going to get some doubles. Tight ends are going to be chipping them. There's going to be a lot of opportunity for that pass rusher on the other side of the defensive line to really be productive. And I think that can be Brian Thomas in the 2025 year. Number 2 on defense, I'm going to go Fred Johnson, leads this team in tackles. Really good spring for this kid, and we knew it had to be a good spring for Fred Johnson. We are concerned about the linebacker play for South Carolina. We love the potential in that room, but not a lot of guys have played. Fred Johnson was the guy we're looking at going into year 2 where, hey, this is your opportunity to really take over this linebacker room. Going into 2025 with all the experience and production that's moving on to the NFL, it sounds like Fred Johnson capitalized on the opportunity that was in front of him. I think you look at Fred Johnson and say he very well could emerge as the best linebacker in this room. And if that's the case, he's going to fly around the football field, make a lot of plays. Number 3, and this might be the most important bold prediction for South Carolina's defense, 3 first-team all-SEC players on the defensive side of the football. Now, why do I think this is such an important bold prediction here? The South Carolina defense in general has it's less of a complete defense. You know, you go back to last year, it was like a very, very good defensive line with very good linebacker play with an exceptional secondary. You go into 2025 and say, all right, we have some questions, you know, at linebacker or in the middle of that defensive line. If South Carolina does not take a massive step back on the defensive side of the football, I think it has a lot to do with your best football players dominating football games. Now, I think we got a lock. Not a lock, but pretty damn close to a lock in Dylan Stewart. If he stays healthy, he's going to be a first-team all-SEC guy in defense. Who are the other guys going to be? I'll look at the secondary. I think Jalen Kilgore could be a very, very good candidate. I think Brandon Sissy could be a very, very good candidate. I think Judge Collier or DQ Smith could be very good candidates as well. If this South Carolina team is good on defense, I think it's because your best players dominate football games for you on the defensive side of the football because you're not as complete as you once were on defense in 2024. So you need your best players to play some of their best football in 2025. And if that happens, I think you're going to get a couple of guys that are first-team all-SEC players on the defensive side of the football. Last bold prediction, South Carolina starts the season 5-0, rolls into LSU in the early October month, 5-0, top 10 team in the country. I look at it and say that's what intrigues me the most is you look at the month of September for South Carolina. Last year it was a gauntlet in the first couple of weeks. This year, you play a really good team in Missouri on the road. That's kind of that one game. I don't even know how hot of a take this is because I think South Carolina will be at least a touchdown favorite in most of their football games in September. On the road at Missouri, if you can get through that one, you're probably looking at a 5-0 start. Rolling into on the road at LSU October 11th, probably as a top 10 team in the country. Am I prepared in early May to pick South Carolina to go on the road and beat LSU? No, I'm not. But I think that sets up for an exceptionally fun football game in the beginning of October. We'll close it out there. Those are my 7 bold predictions for the South Carolina football team. I have a few more that I probably want to talk about, so we might run another one of these episodes back as we get into the month of July. please let it fly in the comment section. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.